I think it's chaos no matter who wins. The problem that we're facing now is that the United States is on the edge of a civil war. Uh, I'm not trying to be inflammatory when I say that, but I say that because the red people and the blue people, the Republicans and the Democrats, um, can't even talk to each other. It's worse than that. They actually hate each other. They have totally different philosophical views. And if Trump wins, uh, the Democrats won't accept that victory.
Welcome to another edition of CEO and Market Expert Interviews. I'm your host, Lucian. Some of you know me as Triangle Investor from social medias. I'm excited to have Doug Casey in my show. Doug is a very, very known name, widely respected speculator, writer, and author of many bestsellers, founder of Casey Research and International Man, someone who I wanted to host for some time now in my show. Doug, really, thank you for coming. It is great to have you here.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, although I'm in Buenos Aires right now. Uh, yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Lucian.
My pleasure. Doug, most of the people know who are you, but nevertheless, tell me a word or two about you, about your background, and what are you doing today?
Well, I guess I'm best known as a writer, and my first book was called The International Man, which subsequently became the largest selling book in the history of Rhodesia. And that is a record that'll never be broken. My second book was called Crisis Investing, and it was the largest selling book in the US when it came out. I've written several books since then. The most recent ones are novels, because I think you can say things in the form of fiction that maybe you better not say in the form of nonfiction. So these three novels are called Speculator, Drug Lord, and Assassin. And basically, they're about reforming the unjustly besmirched reputations of those three highly politically incorrect occupations. So that's the story. And of course, I can't help myself but do a blog called internationalman.com and a podcast called Doug Casey's Take. And that's enough to keep me busy, frankly. But mainly I speculate
Yeah.
in the markets, resource markets primarily, oil, gold, uranium, copper, the whole panoply.
Yeah, we will talk all of them. We will talk uranium, we will talk gold, silver, precious metals, and we can talk copper as well. But I would like to start with your top three predictions for post-election America, like you wrote on your website. And that is actually your views on the cultural, geopolitical, and financial prediction for post-election America. Let's start with cultural predictions. What do you see happens if the Democrats win, and in what scenario do you see if the Republicans win?
I think it's chaos no matter who wins. The problem that we're facing now is that the United States is on the edge of a civil war. I'm not trying to be inflammatory when I say that, but I say that because the red people and the blue people, the Republicans and the Democrats, um, can't even talk to each other. It's worse than that. They actually hate each other. They have totally different philosophical views. And if Trump wins, the Democrats won't accept that victory. I don't know what they're going to do about it. And if Kamala wins, we can talk about the correct pronunciation of her name, incidentally. I believe that's the correct one. That's not what she says. Anyway, we'll talk about that in a moment. No, this is a disaster, but it won't be a civil war like the unpleasantness we had from 1861 to 1865. It'll be different. It'll be different. How different? Well, that's unpredictable because war is unpredictable. But these people hate each other. They can't get along. They shouldn't be in the same country with each other. In fact, I'll go further and say that you shouldn't have a single country with 350 million people. That's just way too big. And the government is way too powerful. These people in the government impose, it doesn't matter who wins. It's going to be chaos. So pick your type of chaos. They're both actually disasters. Although, all things considered, I hope the Republicans win. And why? It's not because they're economic geniuses. It's because they're basically cultural conservatives. They don't want to overturn the whole nature of life and traditions in the US. And the Democrats do. There's an actual real strain of Marxism that runs through the Democratic Party. It started with the colleges, it started with the high schools, it's even in the grade schools. The entertainment industry is totally captured by it. Large corporate managements are totally captured by it. It's everywhere. So I don't know if it can be stopped or turned around at this point, but I think the next few years could be very exciting, which is why I'm in South America.
Yeah, understood. What about geopolitical and financial prediction and implications? How will the markets behave after the elections? What do you think?
Well, it's an old saying in the markets that money makes the mare run. And the US government, this is one thing they don't talk about, either the Republicans or the Democrats, that the US government is running approximately a $2 trillion per year deficit. Where do they get that money? They can't borrow it. They used to, years ago, used to sell their debt to the American people. They're not buying it. Many of them are bankrupt. They were selling it to foreign countries, Japanese, Chinese, others. They're selling their US government debt. They're not buying more. So how is the US government financing its $2 trillion and growing deficit? It sells its paper to the Federal Reserve, our central bank, and they print up money so that the government can spend it. So this is very, very serious. The dollar is in a death spiral. And neither of the parties address that serious issue. What's it going to do to the market? Well, the creation of all these dollars has flowed into the economy. It's been favorable for earnings of big corporations. It's wound up in the shares of big companies. But I think that's going to come to an end. I don't know when, I don't know how, but I don't have much interest in owning conventional US stocks. For that matter, I don't even want to own conventional US real estate. Why? Because it's built on a pyramid of debt in the United States and in many places around the world. You can't buy or you can't sell real estate without a mortgage. And as interest rates go up, and I believe they're going way up in the years to come, it's going to hurt real estate prices badly, in addition to real estate taxes, as local governments go bankrupt. So I'm painting a gloomy picture for you, actually. But there's a bright side to everything. We're headed for a depression, but in a depression, the general standard of living goes down. So that's the bad news. But the good news is that most of the real wealth in the world still exists. It just changes ownership during a depression. Of course, a lot of real wealth can be destroyed if we have hardcore socialists or actually unbelievably communists take over the US, a lot of wealth is going to be destroyed. So I can't wait to see what happens on Guy Fawkes Day in a week.
Yeah. So you believe that interest rates will continue to go up and prices will rise and values will fall. So we are not anywhere near to the peak of both
No,
rising
no,
prices
no,
and the falling values.
no, because as far as the US government's concerned, it's either inflate or die. There's no place else they can get the money that they want to do the stupid things that they do. So they'll print currency and they think they can get away with it. They have no understanding of economics at all. So the dollar is in a doom spiral. And that's really serious because when you destroy a nation's currency, it makes it impossible or very hard for the average person to save. And if you can't save, if your currency is losing value rapidly, you can't get ahead in life. Things become unstable. Uh, so we could have something like a political revolution as a result of all this too.
You had Martin Armstrong recently in my show. He has very similar views like yours. Doug, I would like to get your, would like to hear your thoughts on gold. And could we see gold mania if the scenario, the one you said right now, happens? What will do that to a gold price if we see that scenario?
Well, I've been a gold bug for basically all of my adult life. I started buying gold when it was about $45 an ounce, and I've continued buying it over the years, never sold an ounce, actually. How high can it go? Well, uh, there are a lot of ways of figuring out what the price of gold should be. What we think we know is there are about 7 billion ounces of gold that have been mined since the dawn of history. They're basically all in existence. So that's less than an ounce of gold for every person on the planet. Uh, the gold supply increases. New mine supply, it varies from year to year, but it increases by about roughly at the moment 90 million ounces per year. So that's the increase in the supply of gold. That means that the supply of gold is going up by about 1% per year. Uh, what do I think about gold right now? Because I see it just hit $2,800 for the first time. Uh, look, the thing with gold is it's the only financial asset that is not simultaneously somebody else's liability. It can't be defaulted on. You don't have to trust anybody else. I'm a fan of Bitcoin. I've been a fan of it for many years, actually. Uh, there are advantages to Bitcoin as a money and disadvantages. But I guess to answer the question about gold, yeah, it's going higher out of fear. And then when things really get out of control and some people make some money out of greed. But it's 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 very important to own a lot of gold and not own a lot of paper money. Fiat currency will reach its intrinsic value, which is nothing.
Agreed, Doug, definitely, especially on the not holding fiat currency. But what is in the card for silver? What do you think about silver as physical holding?
Well, it's a secondary money, but in today's world, it's primarily an industrial metal. But it's a very useful industrial metal because it's the most reflective and the most conductive of all of the 92 naturally occurring metals. So it's a high-tech metal, very valuable from that point of view. There's about 1 billion ounces of silver mined every year, so over 10 times by ounces the number of gold, the amount of gold that's mined. But unlike gold, where all the gold that's been mined still exists, it's held in vaults. Silver, there aren't large inventories of silver in the world today. It's a much smaller market. It's much more volatile. It's kind of a poor man's gold. So that when the world financial situation becomes scary in the next few years, I think there are a lot of people that are going to buy silver because it's more affordable than gold. Uh, in terms of price, let's say silver is what, I don't know, $34 an ounce right now. Uh, that's very high from its previous, what I'm trying to say is this. Its previous all-time highs were hit $50 an ounce twice in the past. In deflated dollars, in real dollars, that means that if silver were to hit a new all-time high, it would have to go to $200 at least. In fact, even at $2,800, gold is not at an all-time high. Its all-time high was previously was $800 an ounce, reached back in, was it 1980? But in real terms, if gold's going to have to go to equal its previous high. It's going to have to go to about 33, 34, 3,500. I don't trust the government's CPI figures. They're very politically manipulated, but those are rough numbers. So there's a lot more upside potential in silver, but you got to remember it's basically an industrial metal.
Yeah, but what do you think? Why silver and platinum have greatly underperformed gold over the last 10 years? And do you think that that will change in the upcoming years?
Well, it's primarily because gold is money and silver is primarily an industrial metal. And platinum is not money at all, like palladium. It's like copper. You can make an excellent argument that copper should go much higher and will go much higher, but it's moved up nicely as all these metals have actually, because you got to remember that it was only in 2001 silver was available for what, about $4 an ounce. So over the last generation, it's done quite well. $4 to $34. That's better than the stock market's done. It hasn't done badly,
Yeah,
but it's
definitely.
still cheap, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's done very well, but it's still cheap, I think. Now, at some
Mhm.
point, gold and silver are going to become overpriced. When the public gets really scared and everybody panics into gold because they can hold it in their own clammy little palms, uh, who knows how high it'll go. But at some point in the future, I hope to sell most of my gold and silver. What'll I buy then? I don't know. If Time or Newsweek magazines or the Economist still exist, uh, I think one of them is going to have a tip-off for me. One of them is going to show a golden bear tearing apart the New York Stock Exchange. And that's going to be the signal to sell your gold and buy stocks. But that's quite a while from now.
Let's discuss my favorite commodity. You cannot hold it in your hand, and that is uranium. You have been a uranium bull for years, as I remember. Doug, how are you playing uranium today? And what do you think that how will uranium market look like in few years from now when we enter the supply gap peak?
Well, uranium, the whole argument for uranium is based on power, nuclear power. And the average person knows nothing about physics or power generation, none of those things. He's afraid because of the green movement, which is, well, it's psychologically insane and scientifically ridiculous. But nuclear power is by far the safest, the cleanest, and the cheapest form of mass power generation. Now, I'm not opposed to solar panels or windmills. That's fine in selected locations, selected uses, they're fine. But you can't run an industrial society on either one of them. And that's what these idiot politicians and Greens are trying to do. It's going to be a total disaster. Uh, the answer to the question, and the world needs more power every year. I mean, energy is all about civilization. And you don't want to cut back energy usage. You want more. I mean, eventually, I'd like to see the Earth turn into at least a Kardashev 1.0 society where we can harness all the energy from the sun somewhere or another. So I'm very pro energy in all ways, but for the foreseeable future, nuclear is by far the best way to do it. It's the cleanest, unlike any of the hydrocarbons. It's the cheapest, or it should be, if it wasn't for, the unbelievable regulations and lawsuits and all this kind of nonsense, especially with new forms of generating nuclear power, small reactors, the size of the ones you use in nuclear submarines, which can be fueled and buried for 10 years. That's where the real future is for nuclear. And it's by far the cleanest, safest, cheapest. I mean, it's got it all. It's just hysteria on the part of the public and the ruling classes that are anti-nuclear.
How are you?
Answer to the question. I'm very bullish on uranium.
Okay,
Long
okay. And how are you, Doug, playing uranium? Do you hold uranium stocks in your portfolio?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And they're reasonably priced at this point. And they are such a tiny percentage of the value of the S&P. I mean, they're a rounding error. So that at some point, when the mass psychology changes, it's going to be like trying to get the contents of the Hoover Dam through a garden hose. They'll all want to buy uranium stocks, and they'll go to the moon. And the same can be said, actually, of most of these mining stocks, which have teeny weeny market caps. They're not small caps. They're not mini caps. They're not micro caps. They're nano caps, quite frankly. Some are pico caps. They're so small. Nobody's interested in them right now for a number of reasons. That's going to change. And I expect we'll have an explosive bull market in all these resource stocks.
Yeah, that's your famous quote, garden hose. Everybody knows that is one smart thing you said. Actually, the whole uranium market has a market capitalization of, let's say, a beer producer, Budweiser or something like that. It's around 70 billion. So it's really unbelievable. It's a small sector, just like you said. One other question about uranium. I will not ask you the specific names, but do you play the uranium with the explorers, with the producers, or the developers? Or you play conservatively like with the ETFs?
Well, yes, I do own that uranium ETF. That's convenient. But the explorers have always, and the developers, three classes of mining stocks, if you would. The explorers that don't have anything but are looking for something, the developers who have found something and are trying to prove that it is economic and it can be produced, and the producers. So those are the three categories, and I own all three. I like to listen to a lot of stories. I mean, there are in Canada, which is the epicenter of mining finance in the world, more than London, more than the US, more than Australia, although all three of those others have a lot of resource and mining stocks. There are about 2,000 mining companies. Now, most of them don't mine anything, of course, but Uh, so I like to listen to stories that management tell, and I try to assess what the odds are and try to balance the likelihood that something good will happen to the company fundamentally versus what their market capitalization is on the other hand. And many of these small companies, not just uranium stocks, but gold stocks, many of these companies have market capitalizations of 3, 4, 5, 10, 15, 20, not billion, but millions of dollars, which is absolutely nothing in today's world. So, I listen to stories all the time and look for things that look like they'll work, that look like value.
Okay, fair enough.
And I've got to say one thing I've got to mention, if your listeners are buying small resource stocks, if at all possible, you want to buy the stocks directly from the company in the form of a financing, because they're almost always raising money. I mean, they're black pits for money. They have lots of expenses and they have no income, so they're always raising more money. So if you're bullish on a company, rather than buying it in the open market, uh, it's wise to see if they're financing it. That way you can usually get a discount to the market price, plus typically get a warrant to buy another share at a slightly higher price for, well, up to 5 years. So that's the way I generally invest in these things. Well, I shouldn't say invest. I should speculate because you can't invest in these things.
It's a speculation. Agreed. Doug, I want to hear your take as well on copper. What do you think about the copper market going forward, and how are you playing copper?
Well, of course, copper has become the most fashionable of the quote unquote green metals because if you're going to have electricity, you've got to have copper. Uh, Silver may be the most conductive of the 92 elements, but copper is, well, for practical purposes, it's the only thing that makes sense to conduct electricity. And it's not just building electric vehicles, which I question the utility of them and the economics of electronic vehicles, but all these data centers and the rest of it, it all takes copper. And the thing with copper in particular, because if you're going to build a copper mine, the scale of these things is gigantic. You're talking about $1 billion or $2 or $3 or $4 billion to build it. And once you find a copper deposit, and the world's been pretty well picked over, people have been looking for copper for 2,000 years. Once you find a copper deposit, it costs, which of course in itself costs many millions of dollars. Then you have to prove the amount and the shape of it, and the grade of it, and all kinds of things. And that might cost you another $1 billion. And then building the mine is billions on top of that. It takes from the time of a discovery to the time of a production in copper 15 years. So it's a good long-term play if you think the world will continue advancing. Yeah, copper is an excellent long-term play.
Actually, no-brainer, if you ask me, copper. When it comes to long-term investing, one of the definitely no-brainer commodity. Doug, okay, you're bullish on precious metals, silver, gold. You're bullish on uranium, copper. What else? What commodities are on your radar, so to say?
Frankly, all the commodities, including agricultural commodities, because right now, relative to the price of stocks, commodities are at or near an all-time low. And that's true, even though cocoa and coffee and orange juice, and a lot of commodities have doubled or more in the last few years. They're still cheap in real terms and absolutely cheap relative to the alternative in the financial world, which is stocks. Uh, I'm totally uninterested in bonds, incidentally, because I think interest rates are going up, 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 up from here. So I like the agricultural commodities. And if you were to ask me which is the cheapest agricultural commodity, I'd have to put my finger on corn. Relative to every other grain, it's really, really cheap right now in real terms. Not just relative to other, in real terms, it's cheap. So yeah, that's a good place to be.
Yeah. One other question with regards to your due diligence when you are doing due diligence on buying certain company. I remember the days when I was a subscriber of Casey Research. You had 7 P's, if I remember correctly. It was people, projects, push, promotion. I'm missing 3. My
Yes, you
question
are.
is, i-
Very, and actually, they've grown to 9 Ps. It was a mnemonic to help remember all the things you should look at. And 9 is so many that I can't, it's hard to remember them just as you've found. That's why primitive people, when they count, they say 2, 3, many. It's hard to remember anything beyond 3.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
but
the
go
point
ahead.
is, definitely people are one of the most important metric and the project as well.
The
How are
most,
you?
the most.
Yeah, how are you approaching due diligence? Tell me that in a 3 minute answer, if you can say.
Well, in the past, I used to make it my business to uh, visit managements in offices, usually in Vancouver, which is the epicenter of the mining business, and get to know the people individually, and preferably go on a trip to see the property. You can learn a lot by talking to the people on the site and looking around. And so people are critical because a good guy can take a shell company with nothing in it and turn it into $1 billion enterprise. But an incompetent or a criminal, and you have people that are not honest in this business, like others, can take $1 billion company and turn it into zero. So, out of these 9 things you should look for before you speculate in a mining company, people is number one.
Doug, I would like to conclude this interview with a question that I ask all experts that are in my show, and that is how can average person prepare and protect himself in the upcoming black scenarios, like you said, chaos, even war? What to own in those kind of scenarios and how to protect and prepare?
Well, first of all, you want to have some assets that are in your own hands. And I think that if you're going to save, and you have to save, first of all, you have to produce more than you consume and save the difference. Now, but the question is, where do you put your savings? Most people put their savings in their national currency. That's a big mistake. So build a position in gold, build a position in silver, build a position in Bitcoin, for that matter. That's number one. Number two, most people are not very well educated in economics. They don't know how the world works in terms of the big picture. Uh, so I suggest that people do some reading. The economics that they teach in universities is not just wrong, it's actually the opposite of the truth in many ways. So it just clutters your mind up with irrelevancies and stupidities. I could recommend a couple of books. The simplest to start with, there's a book by Henry Hazlitt called Economics in One Lesson. It's about, I don't know, 110 pages, something like that. But it's a work of genius. I think everybody listening here should get that book and read it. Okay, economics. third is finance and the way the markets work, which is different from economics. You've got to educate yourself because I'm afraid that when the going gets rough, there's going to be huge opportunities. The markets are going to be going up and down like an elevator with a lunatic at the controls. So you have to educate yourself to take advantage of that. I'll give you an example. Uh, I was just in Sri Lanka, Colombo, the capital, and there's a building there of about 30 stories in height. And the penthouse in that building during the crisis they had in 2021, 19,000 square feet, huge, okay? The developer desperately needed money. He sold that 19,000 square foot penthouse for $1 million. So I wish I had been watching Sri Lanka during the crisis. I would have very likely flown there and bought the damn thing. But everybody was so afraid of going to that country at that time. And of course, the COVID hysteria made it hard to impossible. But that's the good thing about, there are very few good things about financial chaos, but one of the good things is maybe you'll get lucky.
That was Doug Casey. Doug, thank you very much for coming to my show. It was a great chat, and I look forward to host you more often in my show. Thank you.
Thanks, Lucian. It was a pleasure talking to you.